I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Global Book Network, we're uncovering lost African history, royal bloodlines, and a battle that could rewrite what we know about the transatlantic slave trade. We're talking about a powerful new book. It is called In Search of the Golden Chalice, The Untold Story. It's written by a terrific author by the name of D.W. Duke. And in the book, he explores the legendary union of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba and how their descendants led a revolutionary war to stop the slave trade in West Africa. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And we'd like to thank our friends at Atticus Publishing for helping us put this terrific author on GBN today. DW, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Logan. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on our show. This is such an amazing work. Did your legal background influence your approach at all to historical research?
It probably did. My legal background, we had to look at a lot of different issues when we come to cases, and I've done international human rights law for quite a while. So I would say, yes, that had an influence.
Yeah, absolutely. Also made you a very skilled researcher as well. Talk to us a little bit about the significance of the Solomonic Empire in African history.
Okay. Most people are aware that King Solomon had what's referred to in the Bible as a friendship with Queen of Sheba, who was the queen over what today would be Ethiopia and Yemen. And they developed a relationship, but in the Bible that Christians use and Jews use, there's no reference to any type of marriage. But if you go into Africa and you start inquiring, you will discover that not only were they married, but they had a son named Ben Sira, and this is actually in the Talmud, by the way. They had a son named Ben Sira who became Prince Menelik I, who ruled over this massive Solomonic Empire that included over a million square miles, which is roughly the equivalent of Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Nevada combined. That would be the size of their basic empire. And then it reached all over Africa. They found evidence of King Solomon in South Africa, but especially in West Africa is where it really gets interesting, because the people in West Africa have a tradition that they are descended from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And it's ironic because I'm the administrator for the Hebrew DNA research project with Family Tree DNA. And I noticed something that would come through quite frequently is people from Africa post very highly in the Jewish categories, Ashkenazi and different Jewish categories. And I wondered, well, why is that? And so then I began inquiring further, started talking to people in West Africa, and this whole story kind of unfolded.
Amazing. What do we know about the three descendants who led the battle in 1617?
Well, we really don't know too much about them. They're kind of a legend, like King Arthur. But we took actual history and combined it with some of the legends and myths that they have to develop an intriguing story. What we do know is that the African slave trade tried to get into West Africa in the early part of the 17th century, and they couldn't get in. They described it as the jungle attacks us. They said, even the lions and the snakes attack us, and we can't get in there. And so they didn't until the latter part of the 17th century. Then they finally made inroads, but it was a very restricted type of slave trade. It wasn't what they had in South Africa. And they never had apartheid there. They never colonized that region of Africa like they did South Africa in different locations. And I think it was largely the result of King Ojagbo and his family that kept it preserved for so long.
Absolutely. Talk to us a little bit about how these African warriors managed to challenge such a large European force.
Well, it was kind of a unique situation. They believed that they were looking for the golden chalice, and the golden chalice is the cup that King Solomon and Queen of Sheba drank from at their wedding. And so it was supposedly put away and was supposed to have significance at some day in the future. So they believed that is what they were doing, but they had actually been summoned to lead an attack against the African slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade. At that time, it was Portugal and England that was coming in with troops, and they were transporting them from the inner part of West Africa. And so what they did, using animals like lions and different animals to assist in the attack, they did attack the village and got them all moving, all the soldiers moving in the same direction, while simultaneously releasing 7,000 slaves from a camp right next door. But then gave them swords and they fought as well. But they pushed them north of the camp about a mile and then forced them to leave. And the whole battle, I don't want to give too much away, but
Yeah,
the amazing part is 2,600 people, 2,700 people attacked 20,000 people and defeated them in 24 hours. So when
amazing.
you look at, and when you read the book, you can see why. What they did, it was just so amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think the story has remained largely untold in Western history?
I think it's because the Atlantic slave trade wanted to present um, an image of Africans as being barbaric, being ruthless, being cannibals, because they wanted the world to believe that they were actually enhancing their lives by bringing them into slavery.
Hmm.
Just a couple of days ago, I watched a movie that I really enjoyed called Amazing Grace, which was about the slave trade and William Wilberforce, who led the legislation in England to make slavery illegal. And that was one of the things that they were arguing. This is a better life for them. The Africans don't mind it; they're happy with it because they get to live with food and so on. Well, that was all a lie. That
Hmm.
was all a lie because there were the African people were very sophisticated. They had universities and they often traveled to Egypt to go to school. They were not they were not what portrayed in the old Tarzan movies at all. A totally different world than what we grew up with.
Talk to us a little bit about how your book challenges the common narrative around the slave trade.
I think what it does is people are so accustomed to just seeing Africans as villagers that really have no common connection to the Western world. And this book really says, no, that's not the true story here. These were very sophisticated people. They were very honorable people. They honor was a very important thing to them. For example, they would if they went to war, they would not kill unless it was necessary.
Hmm.
This was the way that they approached things, and this is what was supposedly passed down to them from the teachings of Solomon.
Hmm.
Of course, the tradition in Judaism is that Solomon invented the game of chess because he thought it would be better than having wars to have kings sit down and play chess games and resolve disputes that way. So that's a tradition in Judaism, and so we know that he was a peacemaker. King Solomon was a peacemaker, and of course, his father was not permitted to build the temple because he had killed too many people in his life, and so
Hmm.
King Solomon was a peacemaker. And then what happens in the Book of Kings in the Bible? King Solomon just kind of there's just a couple very abrupt ending to what happened in his life, other than he left and it says he turned to other gods and all kinds of things. I think what was going on there, he moved to Africa for a much bigger empire. He stayed connected to Israel and he did come back and was buried in Jerusalem. So it wasn't as if he abandoned the Jewish people, but it was just a much bigger empire that he was developing in Africa than what, little Israel ever was.
Why do you think this untold story is especially important now?
I think we need to re-examine the narratives that the world has grown up with. And there are different categories where we see this problem.
Mhm.
We also see it with the Jews. We see that they were the blood libels, all these allegations that were made against them over the years allowed Adolf Hitler to rise in Nazi Germany and become the monster that he became. The same thing happened to the black people, the African people. The whole world was taught that they were these savages, and it simply was not true. And so when people got to meet them, they said, wow, these people are much kinder and much more compassionate than our European counterparts. What's
Mhm.
really going on here? And that's what more and more people say. And many people are coming out and saying that very hospitable people, very kind people. Sure, you had villages where you had cannibalism and things like that. Just like in the United States, we have bizarre, parts of the country. But as a whole, it was a very sophisticated culture.
Was there anything that really surprised you in your research?
A few things. One of them, King of Jogbo, was now according to the literature that exists in West Africa about King of Jogbo. They say he reigned for 140 years, And of course, we look at that and we say, well, how is that possible? But they are adamant that he lived that long and reigned that long. And so I did a little bit of research on him and discovered that he had established a parliamentary system of government in West Africa 100 years before Britain had a parliamentary system of government. He was not what we perceived. He developed field marshals. He developed a type of government that was much more sophisticated and much more fair to the population. One thing that really surprised me is when I started circulating this book, which to me was just kind of a collection of myths and stories and things that I had heard. What surprised me is the educators in West Africa who are adamant that it's a true story. They tell me this is true. We know, we heard this story when we were little. So it touched them, and that was the goal. I wanted them to feel the sense of connection with the story.
Yeah. Do you feel the story is true? Do you feel how much of the story is true? How much of it is embellished? Any guesstimates here?
Well, I went into it believing that it was like any kind of novel. And actually, I'll tell you the way it started was kind of odd. I encountered an excellent graphic artist who does work with computers and does beautiful work. And we were going to do a children's book, a book for kids in school. And she started sending pictures. We started writing. And the more we wrote, it was just going to be like 20,000 words or so. And the more we worked on it, the more we said, wait a minute, this needs to be a full-length novel. So we just kept going and going and going. And I often wonder if there was something that I had learned that I didn't remember, or something I'd heard that is in the back of my mind, because too many people are telling me this is true. So I really don't know. I just can't say. From what I know from my research is that it's the mythology largely that I've heard.
Would you like to see it turned into a film?
I think it needs to be, yes. I think it needs to be a film. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would reach a broader audience then. I mean, and also I think it'd be spectacular to see it visually portrayed as well.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think people would really enjoy it. And so many people are telling me that they've never heard this story, never heard anything like it. If you go back into even looking at films in America, there were films like King Solomon's Mines that talks about this. And of course they said, well, is this true? We don't know. Is it legend? We really don't know. But when you look at the connections of these people, there's no question in my mind that the story of the empire is in fact true. And it passed through many generations, and the Solomonic Empire, it was in existence until just a couple hundred years ago, in various forms. Not always, like we would like it to be, not always with the fairness that King Solomon wanted to project, but it was an empire that was massive.
Amazing. It's an amazing story. We're glad you have it all down on paper for us to enjoy. We would love to see it on the big screen. Hollywood, if you're listening, here's a book that's ready to go. It's called In Search of the Golden Chalice, The Untold Story. It explores the legendary union of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba and how their descendants led a revolutionary war to stop the slave trade in West Africa. DW, thank you so much for joining us here today.
My pleasure to be here, Logan. Good talking to you.
Great having you on the show. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford for GBN. So long for now.